Story time. I want to talk to you about when I was a teenager and I started to practice witchcraft and how I view things then and I view things now, especially in regards to magic and its obscurity. Magic today is not the same as it was 20 years ago. And it's not the same as it was 30 years ago or 40. But I can only relate my personal experiences with witchcraft. When I was about 12 or 13, I started practicing when I was 11 in secret. But when I was about 12 and 13 is when I really started to get a grasp on spell work, right? At least collecting information about how to make spells work. I came from a really strict Christian background. My parents were devout Christians. I was never a devout Christian. Not even when I was a small child. I always did things that were against the beliefs of my elders. So anything occult related was banned from the house. I wasn't allowed to do a lot of things. I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of things. And I had to be very sheltered. So though I had this obsession with the occult, I always felt like I never really was able to explore it until I got into junior high and I had access to the internet. I didn't have a computer growing up, and there wasn't a computer in the house until after, like in the middle of high school, I guess. So when I had access to the internet, it changed my world. The internet now is way different than the internet back then. And this was around 2000, 2001. So a lot of the things that I was able to look up and, research, I don't think I could really do that now because the internet is so filtered. Especially because everybody uses Google. So anytime I had access to the internet at school, I would print out pages on witchcraft and spell work and Wicca and Satanism, whatever I could get my hands on. I compiled a little book of shadows, not that I had written out, but pages I had collected from the internet. Now, my dad was not going to have any of that in his house, so I had to be smart and learn to hide it. So I grew up in the middle of nowhere, out in the desert, where there was a lot of palm trees and a lot of desert greenery, right? And in our yard, there were a bunch of trees, but there were a couple huge palm trees. I mean, huge, like almost 3 stories high. And I would take those pages I collected and fold them up and climb these trees and stick those pages in the trees. Like I would hide them in the little crevices. And that tree became my book of shadows. Instead of having it collected in a notebook, I would have it in a tree. And so when my dad would go to work during the summer when we didn't have any school, I would go out there, climb the trees, pull out the pages and read and study. I also remember that my parents would go to sleep rather early. And so as soon as the sun went down and they were knocked out, I would take candles that I would collect. Everything, all my magic supplies, I didn't keep in the house. My parents were not going to have that. So everything I kept outside in nature. So when the sun would come down and my parents would go to sleep, I would sneak out of the house, go into those trees, take those pages. I would make these ritual garments out of sheets, go outside under the full moon, and I would practice witchcraft. I would light candles. I would light incense. I had a bunch of herbs that I stole from my mother's cabinet and tried to work magic as best as I could with what I had available to me. Nothing was as easily accessible to me as it is today. There was no YouTube. There was the internet, but it wasn't as prominent as it is now. And so at the time, I would go to bookstores when my parents would take us. And at the time, it was Walden Books. And my mom and dad were having some like marital issues. So when we would go to the bookstores with them, they were like off busy looking up self-help books. I would sneak off to the New Age section. And then this is so against the law, but I would go into the New Age section and look through books and tear pages out and then take them with me and add that to my tree book of shadows. Eventually I got into high school and I left home early. And so all of those pages were left behind. But I didn't have the what do you call it? I didn't have my parents keeping me back, holding me back from exploring. So once I was out, I did whatever I wanted. I researched, I studied, I talked about witchcraft all the time. I also remember in my early 20s getting on the bus and going out and finding people who practiced and going to meetings and gatherings. And some of them were just, they were like pretty lame. They were a bunch of D&D players or I don't know, into role playing, and nobody really actually practiced magic. A lot of Wiccan groups who were very all about the threefold law and karma, and it was super, super watered down. Today, magic is so easily accessible via the internet, TikTok, and YouTube, and it's become very watered down and diluted, and it's lost its obscurity. I miss the times when magic was strange. And you can say that it's strange now, but it really isn't. Everybody's doing it. It's just not as cool as it was back then. And I know I probably sound really old saying that, but it is what it is. So I feel like my real only outlet now to express myself magically outside of my own personal spell work is through music. Writing music, especially heavy metal. I can weave my magic through there and express it artistically through there versus coming on YouTube or TikTok and spitting out a video that somebody else has already put out. But I'm still going to be posting videos. Shit, bitch. Anyways, that's just my little story time. But I love my journey as a witch thus so far.